Morning, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to Westside Unitarian Universalist Church on this cold but beautiful, beautiful spring morning. Well, we're one day short of the vernal equinox, but, you know, my eyes are telling me the pollen is there already, and so this is not anything contagious, just so you know. We are a church that celebrates diversity in all ways. And then sometimes we celebrate commonalities, like the joy of spring arriving. Mixed with, you know, the pollen stuff. I'm Suzanne Molnar. I'm the worship associate for today, a member of the worship committee. And our service this morning is both celebration and some education around the vernal equinox. Please stay, if you are here in person, please stay after for coffee, tea, conversation, and if you're joining us virtually, get yourself some coffee or tea. There are a number of announcements, which I will give briefly because I know the people seeing this online don't get the full text, but you can look them up on our website. Okay, so today, the next Earth Church meeting is today, this afternoon, 3 o'clock. Reverend Bodeau will be leading it. Sitting in a sacred circle, sharing experiences of inspiration in nature, creating ritual together. And the forecast says it's going to be warmer this afternoon, so hopefully this can be outside. The March Book Club, reading The Half-Known Live, In Search of Paradise by Pico Ayer. We'll be meeting next Saturday, at 10 o'clock on Zoom. And the Zoom invitation will be online. Next Saturday also is the Sugarlands History Walk. And there is still space, according to Ellen. Yes, she nodded. Yes, there is still space if anybody wants to join. This is an auction item, and it's $20 a person or $60 maximum for a family. Contact Ellen if you're interested. It will be starting at the Riverview Quiet Walkway just off Highway 441. There'll be a picnic lunch here at church first, and then go out to the park.
Let me know by Tuesday.
Oh, yes, let her know by Tuesday so she knows how many gourmet lunches to pack. Right. Linda, let's see, you're going to do an announcement about the congregational meeting right now. Okay.
So by now you've probably received the announcement for the meeting electronically. It's next Sunday after the service. We will be having our March congregational meeting. This is an important meeting where we will be electing officers for the board and discussing the budget for the upcoming fiscal year as well as some other items. So please be here if you can to vote. If you cannot be here, you can vote by proxy, and the information on how to do that is in the information that was sent to you and in the newsletter as well. Thanks.
Let's see. So Elizabeth's not here, but another auction item that still has space, poetry and pets. Join this rescheduled auction item reading Sharon Creech's Love That Dog about a young boy named Jack who, through the nudging of his teacher, learns to love poetry. And joining at church or through Zoom, $15 for a chance to read this Cute little story, really. It only takes you 30 minutes. Plus, Elizabeth says, I have a book to lend the first person who signs up. So, Elizabeth Corbett, contact information is in the directory. Knoxville New Age Fair, April 22nd. This is held here. It is not a West Side function, but it is held here, a community fair featuring psychics, card readers, crystal vendors, Reiki, spiritual healing, and more. Entry is $3 a person or donation to the food bank. Death Cafe, April 29th. Sorry, this is way in advance. People who are wanting to meet with Laurie Allian to talk about death, about our feelings about it, our thoughts about it, deaths of loved ones, death of self, free-form discussion. She says no sales pitch or educational bias. RSVP to life.death.laurie@gmail.com. And check out our newsletter for information on our weekly religious education offerings, like Wednesday's Thinking About Theology and Thursday evening conversations. These are on Zoom. Okay. We now have a gathering song brought to us by the choir.
Good morning, everyone. It's good to see you all. If I haven't met you yet, my name is Reverend Carol Bodeau, and I'm privileged to serve here as minister. Today, we are going to be talking about springtime. Easter, which is the Christian version of that holiday, and the sort of non-Christian versions of it, some that predate Christianity. Another announcement to keep in mind as we are thinking about the spring holidays is on April 9th, which is Easter proper. Today, this week, we're sort of thinking about the spring equinox, but the celebration of Easter, we hold our flower communion. So on April 9th, just remember that's a few weeks away, bring your flowers for our communal flower communion. Something to be thinking about. So as I invite the bowl to sound this morning, I want you to think about things that you're liking and things that you're not liking. Because the spring equinox is all about dark and light being in balance. And metaphorically, that's about what's the way that life is kind of like that. It's glass half full, glass half empty. What are you liking? What are you not liking? What's working for you? What's not working for you? How is the balance of what we might call positive and negative playing out in your life, and where do you tend to put the most attention? So the bowl will sound. I invite you to become fully present and aware of that tension in your own life.
I'd like to invite Joey Gall to light our chalice, and I am going to read 2 haiku celebrating spring. It is spring again. Gay in the garden gather sunbathing sparrows. That's on Ostara. And again, same poet. Silent cherry bloom. Again, with your old eloquence, address my inner ear. Congregation will now sing number 19, The Sun That Shines. Rise as you're willing and able.
So, as Suzanne was saying, it is spring, which comes with a mixity of things, rain and flowers, with cold and sunshine. It is the turning of the seasons that keeps us moving from day to day, month to month, and year to year. This is Francis C. Anderson, Jr., To Free the Heart. Through dreary, sodden days, the field sponged up the graying skies. And now the sun lies soft as birth again, as if the earth had just begun. And blossoms on the vines designed in spring come out to sing again. And everywhere the ripening pushes falling leaves apart to free the heart for freshening. As through the seasons of our years, becoming often waits the nourishment of tears.
The choir will now sing for us as we take the morning offering. The offering, too, is a celebration of West Side, of our Share the Place partner, and of our having money that we can donate for what really matters to us.
Thank you to the choir. That's one of my absolute favorite songs in our hymnals, because it's kind of got that feeling of like beauty and harmony, but also little melancholy in it. It's a wonderful kind of mixity of things for the spring. So for those of you who happened to be here either virtually or in person last week, or maybe listened online to last week's service, we were talking about transformation and how transformation and change are a little bit different. That change is sort of like a shift from one state to another, but transformation is something deeper and more qualitative and essential than that. And one of the things we talked about is that sometimes transformation is instantaneous, some kind of spontaneous, real deep change in us, but often transformation takes time. And it's a process with some ups and some downs in it. This is what spring is like. So today I'm going to share a sort of a story about the stories about the spring season that have change in them, but they also have transformation in them. And this is stories that are about the spring equinox and also the Christian holiday of Easter. So we're going to go way back to start this story. We're really going to be talking about the stories that are associated with the neo-pagan tradition of Ostara, which is what in the neo-pagan traditions the Spring Equinox celebration is called. So we're going to start in the year 30. You're welcome to come up and say hi. Come on up. Hi, I'm Carol. What's your name?
I'm Billy.
Hi, you want to come up and say hi? You want to come up and see what's up here? Come here. Come on up. Look, this is what we do up here. So see, I have words that I read, and I talk about stuff. You want to see anything else up here?
Yeah.
What else do you want to see? This is more important, people, than a sermon. Right? What else do you want to see? You want to see the chalice?
Yeah.
Look. Look. There's a chalice. This is a symbol of hope and feeling good. Okay. You want to work out? I'll find you. And how about, you want to see the piano? Maybe somebody over here can show you the piano. You can't play it maybe right now, but later you can, okay? Okay, so here. Somebody want to help? Somebody, if you're up and help, you can see the music, and then you can see in the back, and I'll finish with the video. Thanks, great, awesome. Super way more important than anything I was going to say. You feel free to wander around. Just be careful, okay? Come on. It's good. You can even look around in here if you want to while I'm talking. So, most of us know this story that started about the year 30. Anybody know what happened around the year 30? There's a story of Jesus of Nazareth's resurrection, right? So, but there's this, we're going to deal with a little issue of change around words before we even talk about that. When we say the year 30, anybody have any votes for what letters we should put after the number 30? I heard CE. Preference, anybody got preferences for a different version? AD. Okay, let's talk about the change of using AD to CE. So the version that was pretty popular for a long time was AD. And that refers to Anno Domini, which means in the year of our Lord, right? And the thing that went before 0 in that calendar was BC, before Christ, right? But those are terms that are specifically used in the Gregorian calendar to mark it as Christian, which some people were thinking didn't work out so good for them, right? That the year 0, the beginning of all things, was the life of Jesus of Nazareth, because that wasn't necessarily their theology. So, for a very long time, for at least 100 years or more, the non-Christian traditions have used this other language, CE, Common Era, and BCE, before the Common Era, to mark those times, okay? There's been a change, which is also a little bit of a transformation, to using CE and BCE more broadly now to show respect for traditions other than the Christian tradition, okay? So we're starting in the year 30 CE, 30 of the Common Era, right? Which is, according to the traditional histories, is about the time that Jesus of Nazareth died. So Jesus was, in that story, crucified by the Roman government, and this kicked off a religious movement that almost immediately became pretty popular and spread pretty fast around the world. We know that by about the year 180 CE, Christian people were celebrating what they called Pasch, which was a word that was sort of derived from the Jewish Pesach, which means Passover, okay? So they were honoring this event that was very important in their theology. And we have records of that, historical records of that from about the year 180 CE. And it spreads. So people are celebrating this moment for a really long time. Now, in the Middle Ages, one of the traditions in the Christian churches during the Lenten season leading up to Pasch, you're going to find this fascinating, because I sure did, I had no clue, is that observant Christians were required to abstain from eating eggs. That was part of Lent, and everybody had to do it. So what do you suppose they had to do to their eggs to keep them fresh after their chickens laid them for the few weeks of Lent? They had to hard-boil them. Who knew? Not me. I thought I knew a whole bunch of stuff. I had no clue. So we know this fact from writings from around the year 600 CE by Pope Gregory. There's also some evidence that at some point in those 600 years, people began coloring the eggs because they wanted to have a celebration to eat them at the end of the Lenten fast. Didn't know that. Okay, so, and somewhere around that time, people began to talk about what we now call the Easter Bunny, but that then they called the Passage. There were different names in different languages, but it was more the Paschal, the Passage hare, okay? Now, it's impossible to say, and this is where it gets tricky tracing history. It is hard to say what connections to pre-Christian traditions there are coming into connection with the Christian traditions around these things that are so important to us now. The history of the holiday gets a little interesting. It's likely, even pretty certain, that people all over the world had eggs and rabbits in their spring holidays. And you will look around. Suzanne was able to come up with an awful lot of them. CR, okay? It's pretty clear that they're obvious symbols, right? Let's think about what the obvious symbols of springtime and transformation are. Rabbits make a lot of sense. Eggs make a lot of sense. But we actually don't know in a written historical record how the Christian version of those and the non-Christian version of those came together. Okay? We know that eggs were colored in other parts of the world and across many traditions. We know that at some point in the 16th or 17th century, what was originally called the Passas, say that 10 times fast, the Passas, which is the Paschal hare, the Passover hare, the Paschal hare. We have, we were talking about it this morning earlier. You could also, it's also sometimes called the Osterhase, right? We have multiple Osterhasen around. That they were probably brought to the Americas by German immigrants, okay? Now, we don't actually have evidence of exactly how or when or where, okay? So we have lots of evidence for the Christian celebrations of this holiday, and anybody of you raised Christian will have heard the phrase, the Paschal Lamb, used to describe the life of Jesus, right? Because Passa is really important. Okay, now, this is where it gets super interesting. I will admit that I myself have stood up here in the past. It is so cool having you up here with us. You gonna go over there? Okay, bye. They are so much more important. New life, new birth is so much more important than the past. Isn't this interesting? Let us all pause for a moment. It would be really easy to be distracted by new life, distracting us from our traditions. The whole point of transformation and change is being willing to be present with what is new and what is alive and what is vibrant, and to create stories that are about that. It's way more important. So when we talk about, yes? And they know each other. They know each other. Elizabeth, our membership coordinator, and Brianna. Yep. We know this kid. So in the stories, what is the point of the story of that season? It's new life, right? And we make up stories that match where we are to talk about new life and what's happening around us. So I personally have stood up here and told stories that I thought were true about Ostara. Like, I have myself said, oh, you know, Ostara existed before the other tradition, and by gosh, that was stolen from the pagans. The Christians stole it from the pagans. It is entirely possible that there were, in fact, pre-Christian traditions, probably were, and we do know that in other holidays, for example, Christmas and some of the other holidays, we have historical records demonstrating the adoption and adaptation of the holiday, but we don't actually have those records for Easter, which is fascinating because stories and how we tell the stories often has more power for transformative change than actual history does sometimes. If you would like proof of this, you can simply turn on your radio or your television. How we tell stories has profound impact on how people shape their lives. Stories actually really matter. So here's some really interesting stuff about the story about this particular spring tradition. So you've got the Christian peoples of the world celebrating things like the Paschal hare, and they're coloring eggs, and they're doing it as part of the Christian tradition, very possibly also part of the pagan tradition. Storytelling and media. This is fascinating. The Venerable Bede was a Christian monk and theologian and historian living in England in the 8th century. Okay? He wrote the essential book called The Ecclesiastical History of the English People. The title's actually in Latin. I'm not going to read it to you in Latin. And this is important because there was another work he wrote called De Temporum, or Of Time, which was about how calendars worked then. Very important stuff, right? Now, in this work, which was written around the year 703, Bede, the Venerable Bede, explains the names of months, including the name of what we now think of as April. So here we've got someone in the early 700s writing a story about what is true. And he's got to pick and choose what he includes. So he decides to include this little detail that, according to him, Eosturmonath, the name of April in some Germanic languages, the Saxon name, is named after a Saxon goddess called Eostre, Eostra. Okay? It's the first historical reference that we have to Eostra. Okay. We're not really sure if she existed. Bede said she does. He heard about her from somebody. What this whole study of the spring equinox has taught me is that life is a giant game of telephone. Does anybody remember playing telephone in camp where you sit in a circle? Life is a giant game of telephone, and if our current situation in our world does not demonstrate that, I don't know what does, right? But so-and-so, but this, right? So Bede says, I heard about that this is named after this goddess named Eostre. And we're not sure where he heard about her. There's a lot of speculation about that. And some modern scholars and historians suggest that she was actually a local goddess worshipped in England, in the area of southeastern England around Kent, I believe, where there's some linguistic evidence showing that there was a goddess of the east known as Ostara, and that maybe, because he kind of hung out in that neighborhood, maybe he heard about her, and maybe he, so anyway, there's a lot of guessing going on, right? And what we have is what's called syncretism, when traditions merge together and we're not really sure exactly who said what, when, which time. So Bede makes this comment about there's this Saxon goddess, all right? Time passes, people start to tell stories about her, a little bit. We're not really sure who tells which stories. By about the year 1600, notice how long of a game of telephone this is. It's a long game of telephone. In the year 1610, Pope Paul V formally gave his blessing to the eating of hard-boiled eggs as a commemoration of the resurrection. So that was like an actual papal edict about eating hard-boiled eggs on Easter. Had no clue that was true. First, I was raised Catholic, and I didn't know it. And second, I've told stories about Ostara, and I didn't know it. Okay. And at the same time, somewhere around the mid-1600s, German Lutherans we have records that they were celebrating the Osterhase here in the Americas. And then enter into the game of telephone the most important figure of all, Jakob Grimm. Anybody know who Jakob Grimm was? The Brothers Grimm, who are known for telling stories. Jakob Grimm, who is a linguist and a myth collector and a teller of tales, enters into the story. In 1835, around there, he reads Bede's history of the calendar stuff. And he reads about this Eosturmonath. And he thinks, she's fascinating. This must be a really fascinating goddess, this Eostre. So he starts making up conjectures. Well, if she existed, I bet people would have said her name like Ostara. And if this was all, I'm just saying, I was having some moments while I was reading this. Because I was like, uh-oh, I have to eat some crow here. Because I've told the story like it was true. And in fact, Jakob Grimm made all this stuff up. So he hypothesized, he conjectured extensively on what would her name might have been and how might people have celebrated. Oh, maybe people would have celebrated. Maybe these rabbit and egg traditions are associated with her. And fascinated and inspired by this, many other people joined in the game of telephone to tell stories about the now well-established ancient goddess Ostara, for whom we have no evidence whatsoever. And at this point in the narrative, of studying the narrative, Carol, I become perplexed and confused and say, but wait a minute. I thought she was real. Apparently, I have, like many others, been swept up in a syncretic narrative that, while theologically and symbolically and metaphorically real and solid, is historically hard to prove. That doesn't mean it's false. It just means we can't prove it. Eostre probably existed because Bede probably didn't write down, he's known for not writing down much stuff that he didn't have some reason to write down. So Eostre, some pre-Christian people or later Christian people probably had some version of this spring goddess. She probably had many names and was tied to some places and sometimes by some people. We don't know exactly who, where, or when. Okay? Now, isn't it interesting that right now, if you go on the internet and you look up Ostara, if you really look, you're going to find a firestorm of debate. I tell you this story partly to say we can compare this to many, 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 many other things happening in our modern media, right? It's really hard to tell what's true. Some theologians are out there arguing that it's all made up, it's a complete horrible lie designed to destroy Christianity. Other people are out there arguing, see, the Christians are just trying to bash us pagans, and there are false narratives being thrown left and right at each other, right? Okay. I'm surprised at how caught up I got in this myself without knowing exactly what the lineages of the stories were. It is a little bit of a modern day, like cautionary tale for me, okay? What's actually true is that between about 30 CE, when Jesus of Nazareth died, and now a whole lot of religions and people and traditions and narratives all mushed and merged and smerged together about spring. That's what's true. And most of how that went down is a complete and utter mystery. which is how I feel about a lot of modern politics. Because you can hear completely opposing narratives argued with absolute conviction and some list of facts that go with them, right? So there's this story that's a contemporary story about Ostara that I myself have actually told without knowing its origin, is this story where Ostara rescues an injured bird and turns it into a hare. Turns out that was popularized in 1987. That's tricky, isn't it? Here, I'll tell you what, you cannot blow out this one. I'll let you blow out this one. Hard. Even harder. Good job. Okay, now the other ones have to stay lit, okay? Would you like to hold it? Take that back over where Elizabeth is. Okay, thanks. So, there's this story that Ostara turns a bird into a hare. And it turns out that where there were some versions of this around in the 1800s, that's the earliest we have any evidence for it, is the early 1800s. It was really 1987 when that story became popular. Sarah von Branach made that story popular. And I will admit that I told that story like it was an old one, because I'm a sucker too. So why, now, I'm like, I could have not told you all that, right? Why would I come in here? And I was leaving home this morning thinking, I don't want to go tell this story. I don't want to tell this story. Like, I believed the telephone whispered in my ear. And this is where change and transformation come in. It would be really interesting to think about what kinds of changes or transformations I might go through as part of really looking into this story deeper. I have two options. I can say, oh, I better change my narrative. I could just change on the surface of that, right? I could just change on the surface of that and say, oop, I got that story wrong. I better get it right in the future. Or I can do the deeper transformation, which is what the spring holiday is all about. It doesn't matter actually which version of the story you look at, whether you're looking at the story of Jesus of Nazareth, whether you're looking at the pagan stories of spring, whether you're simply looking around outside. The central theme of this time of year is transformation. And transformation doesn't always come easily. And here's the most important thing. Transformation often requires admitting that we didn't know something, that we were imperfect, that we knew less than we thought we knew, that we were less than we thought we were. Expanding to something bigger, learning something more, growing and changing often means being willing to acknowledge and let go of the past in a way that is deep and profound. So I could just say, whoop, I won't tell that story again. Or I can say, wow, what did I just learn about myself? What did I want to believe about myself? I wanted to believe about myself that I was good at checking my facts. But that wasn't actually true. Certainly not in that instance. Now, you aren't necessarily all going to have to come up here and say that in front of a room full of people on television, but I recommend it as a practice. Transformation requires humility and the willingness to let go of ideas about ourself and the world that we feel deeply attached to. So what does that mean? What would it take for me to change not just the data set of what I know about this holiday, but to transform myself based on that experience? Well, first, it takes just a willingness to be deeply changed, right? It takes the willingness to go the next step and ask the question, wow, pretty good chance there's a deeper pattern here that doesn't have anything to do with Easter that I need to look at. Second, it would mean taking the time and maybe getting the resources to ask other people to reflect on that with me. Like, wow, does anybody notice ways I do that in other ways? Maybe my partner, maybe the board, maybe my friends. Maybe I turn to other people and say, I learned this thing. Help me reflect on that. And finally, it means keeping an open mind and heart about all the ways that patterns play out in our lives, right? It means being willing to see that it's more important to learn and grow than it is to hold on to the familiar sense of identity or reality that I have. Transformation implicitly means accepting a new version of reality. It means being willing to go with the flow. It means being willing to see things and do things differently. I liked the narrative about Christians stealing the history. I liked it. There were parts of my identity that were attached to it. And in fact, it's true about some other holidays. And in fact, there's a whole lot about Easter and the Christian version of the holiday that probably does come from pre-Christian traditions. And I was holding on to a piece of my identity that I need to allow myself to grow beyond. So, I'd like to invite you to ask yourself about that. What are the parts of your beliefs or your identity or your convictions that you're attached to that maybe, just maybe, shape the ways you hear and tell stories that are limited? We do live in a giant game of telephone. And modern media has made that giant game of telephone a whole lot more complicated, quick, and risky, right? So ask yourself, what are the ways that I participate in the game of telephone that I have attachments to the way I tell stories and the way I see myself? I freely and openly admit that I made some less than accurate statements about the history of Ostara. I, in fact, did that. I had the gist of the theology and the symbology close, as far as I can tell today, but I remain open to the possibility that new information will appear tomorrow or next week that will ask me to once again transform my narrative and make space for a bigger, wider, more refined view of things. And I would encourage us to think about doing that together. It is so comfortable to get set into an assumed pattern. I've spent a lot of time with a lot of scientists. Many of you are scientists. And we all know that used unwisely, data sets can very easily be manipulated in order to tell stories certain ways. Right? Data sets are selective sometimes. We choose what we're going to include in the studies. We choose which media we're going to listen to. We choose which reports we're going to read. We choose what we're going to take in. Right? We choose what narratives we're going to hear and what narratives we're going to tell. So I invite you all to take the challenge of maybe looking at expanding the data. Do something unpredictable. I want to thank our wonderful visitor. Is it Garrett? Garrett? Barrett? Help me. Elizabeth, what's his name? Barrett, thank you very much. I appreciate that. Barrett was really helpful to us this morning. Thank you for coming this morning, Barrett. You really helped me. Because Barrett showed us that it's more important, instead of trying to push away the new surprising thing that doesn't fit what we were planning or expecting, like, that's not the right way to respond. it is so much more expansive and joyful and hopeful to say, wow, okay, there's this new opportunity. I don't have a plan for this. I don't know what's going to happen. Who knows what's going to happen? This is unpredictable. It's way more important. So this week, catch yourself, just once, if you can. Catch yourself trying to stick to the narrative when there's a hint that maybe something else new is trying to come in. Be open to the possibility that you might turn on a different radio station. Not because you're going to full out believe it, but just because you're curious what they might say. Look up at a different website. Listen to a different source. Not because you're wrong, but because we're open and willing, right? To expand and adapt and change, because in the cycle of life, spring is all about the transformation and the new possibility. So I would be very curious to hear your own stories of being willing to adapt and change and be surprised, even if it means changing your own identity a little bit. We are going to sing one more song together, which is a perfect example of change in process and change that could still potentially keep going on. This is a great song. It is a 19th century song. So it's got some words in it that are not particularly modern, some concepts in it that made me go, I'd like to think about that a little bit. So the story of this song, it's hymn number 331, Life is the Greatest Gift of All. So it is syncretic, which means mixed and merged and smushed together. The words were written in the mid-19th century by a guy named William Oliver. And the music, it's called Brother James Eyre, was written by James Lythe Macbeth Bain, long name, who was a Scottish mystic and poet. And they were smushed together. They showed up together in the early 20th century, put together by Waldemar Hille. So this is one great example. Like many of our songs, we take them as, oh, they've always been this way. No, they're all mushed and changed and mushed and changed. While you're reading this song or singing this song or listening to this song, whichever you choose to do as we sing it, I would ask you to say, how would I rewrite this song? Okay? So, should you wish to accept the challenge, I would like to receive in my email a few revised versions of Life is the Greatest Gift of All. Think about how you might change this song, adapt, and bring it. We're going to sing it the way it's written. It's beautiful, and we might adapt it and change it in some ways. This is sort of a precursor to Elizabeth's poetry workshop. Take the poem as it's written and revise it in your own hand. Please rise if you are willing and able, and join in singing Life is the Greatest Gift of All, number 331. would you be willing to help me for a minute? Barrett, you want to help me? Will you help me? I need help. Will you come help me? Okay, come here. Come on, I need your help. You're gonna have to put the book down. I'm gonna have to pick you up when I reach the handle, so put it right there. Okay. All right, here, come here. We're gonna do a job. Okay. So Barrett's gonna help me with this really important job. He's gonna help me extinguish the chalice. You get to blow out the big candle, okay? Okay, just a minute. So we're gonna tell him why we're doing that, okay? So we blow out the chalice, but we carry that light inside ourselves. So can you imagine that you have a big shiny light right inside you? Can you pretend that? You pretend that? What color is the shiny light inside you? What would your color be?
Green.
Green, fantastic. That's a spring color. Okay, think about what color the light is.
And then sun.
Okay, so there's a child inside you that's willing to experiment. There's a child inside you that's willing to change plans. There's a child inside you that's still willing to have a new way of experiencing the world. As Barrett and I extinguish the chalice, I invite you to carry that inside your heart as you go into the week.
Okay.
Okay, ready? You ready? Okay, so the biggest job's going to be to blow this one. It's big. Harder. Hard.
Huh?
Okay, 1, 2, 3. Good job. Okay, now we're going to do this one. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Good job. Everybody give Barrett a big hand. Good job. There you go. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. And everybody's welcome to join us for our Ostara celebration this afternoon. Good job.